The number one law in the universe is to not mess with another life form. They need to evolve on their own. And so from what I can tell, the divas or devas were like an alien race of galactic police. So they came here to find out what was going on, and a battle ensued. And this is why I think that this race that came to Earth was from Tiamat, because they destroyed the planet Tiamat. So this is what caused the solar system to go into chaos. Now, if you look at our word devastation, it's got the word diva at the beginning of it, deva, and it's there because they caused it. When anything something has is called devastation. Now, we also use the word catastrophe and disaster. Both those words mean without a star. So our words are telling us that we need to look at our history. So this caused so much disaster and catastrophe here on the Earth that it killed a bunch of the aliens, that it killed their home planet Tiamat. They were on Mars, it killed them there, and there were very few left here on Earth. And so this was the uprising of the first race, the Homo sapiens, and they rebelled and left. The place that they were at was Atlantis. They left and made Lemuria. So this is how Lemuria was created, and it's another reason that we don't know a lot about Lemuria. The aliens staying in Atlantis. They're either going to have to work together or they're just going to war the whole time. Now, a lot of people don't know this, and this women, you got to realize your power. Bloodline runs through the female. If you want to know your true ancestry, you need to follow your mom, grandmother, your great-grandmother, because the bloodline runs through the female. So yeah, if you want to know your true ancestry, keep going through your mom's side and follow
it. Welcome to the Awakening Entrepreneur Podcast. This show is for entrepreneurs that have chosen to define their life beyond the material. They have followed their soul on a hero's journey towards the mystery of the spiritual. I'm your host, Garrett Ng. Each episode will be learning from awakened entrepreneurs and spiritual thought leaders. They have broken through the mold of being ordinary to extraordinary, challenging our paradigm, shining light to the dark, giving hope when there is doubt. The moment of truth is upon us. It is time to transcend our world from fear to love. Are you ready? Let's go! Welcome to this week Awakening Entrepreneur Podcast. Wow, I've been waiting for a few weeks for this episode to get recorded. When I was going deep dive in my journey of discovery, lately I've gone to the Ra, the Law of One work, and I've got onto a lot of Dolores Cannon's channel work of hypnosis work that goes into the ancient times of Atlantis, and that led me to Lemurians. And now I'm getting, fragment of the history of what really happened. It's almost like when you go through the channeling sections, especially from Dolores Cannon, it's almost like you got one person recalling a story, another person recalling story. Imagine someone on Earth right now. There's like, 7-8 billion people on Earth, and you're getting one person's perspective, and then you get a second person perspective, you get a third person perspective. It's hard to really get a complete picture of what really happens just within one civilization. And when I'm trying to piece together, hey, this Lemurian and this Sumerian and this Anunnaki stuff, it's like, hang on, which one actually went first, and how does the dinosaur fit in, and the Neanderthal and the apes and chimpanzees and the different races of that we seeded from the other beings? It just got way too confusing. And as I do, as an internet geek or nerd or someone that's been resourceful connected to internet, I go on the internet and search. And after going to sites after sites after sites, I stumble across this site. It's like encyclopedia of the whole timeline of human history, even beyond humanity existence, even where our souls came from. And I just go, wow, this is amazing. And it's not just from one person's source, okay, they channel certain information. It's a very well-researched site that pulls sources from many different places, something I would love to do, but probably wouldn't have the patience and even the writing skills. The writing is just like when you're reading it, it's just like reading a piece of like Shakespeare or something. It just sings to the heart. And so I reached out to this person. All I had was his website. The website is called Secret of the Serpent. That name in itself is like, there's a lot of mystery to it. And then like I was very blessed that the person responded, and this person goes by the name of James G. He's like a celebrity on the internet in this community of awakening people, awakening souls that willing and wanting to remember more. And so today we've got James on the line with us. So James, welcome.
Thank you, Gary. It's very kind of you. Very kind of you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Man, from the very first few seconds we connected via email and now on the Zoom call, I feel like there's no warming up. We didn't do any small chat, right? We just like,
Right.
there's this immediate deep connection that we feel like we connected already.
Yes, well, I mean it's we're remembering, we're connecting. It's great. I mean, that's what happens when people that are on the same, I call it vibration. It's like they know each other instantly.
So James to me is like a Batman. Like he's got in his daytime, he's got his normal role as Bruce Wayne, and which he does his thing. But nighttime, that's when he starts to compile in his off-duty hours. That's when he compiles his literature of actually what happens in this awakening world. So James, when did you actually started your awakening journey, and how did it start?
Well, my awakening journey actually started, I'd say 10, 12 years ago. And it actually started, I've always been a myth, love the myths. I love history. And I guess it would actually start with the show Ancient Aliens. That show, I mean, once it hit, I was like, wow, there's other people out there that think this. So that's when I actually was like, okay, I need to start putting out what I've learned in the ancient texts. And it coincides with a lot of what they have, but I go much further. They only go to a certain point because they don't want to lose people. I just want to put it out there. I care. I don't care if you believe it or not. It's what I've actually read in the text. So here it is.
Yeah, wow. And in terms of a personal remembrance, obviously you into a lot of the myth and the aliens and stuff like that's interesting. But from reading quite a few of your articles that you've shared, there are certain things that it doesn't say on those articles, but that to me, there's something that's happened in your life that validated a lot of the things that you are reading, you're sensing there's more to life than this materialistic reality, than this 3D reality. So what are some of those things that you've experienced that from an experiential level, you know there's more to life than what's been taught in school or from society?
Well, we have a deep connection with the subconscious that we've lost. And Carl Jung, he called it synchronicity. You have things that happen in your life that tells you that, hey, this is it. You follow this path, but you have to be looking for them. If you're not looking for them, it's just something that happens as coincidence. And if you look at the word coincidence, it's two incidences happening to create one. Yeah, it's two incidences happening. And if you see the one trying to move your way, you can move in that direction. And that has happened to me several times. And as far as I'll get things that'll say, just like watching Ancient Aliens, I always question, oh, am I crazy? Am I the stuff that I'm reading? Am I right? Because Eric Von Daniken, I read his books and I was like, this is great. He's onto something, but he's one person. And Zachariah Sitchin, he was another person, but that's just a couple people. When this show came out, people started talking about it at work, and I was like, okay, there's synchronicity right there. This is what I need to start following.
Man, you're name dropping a lot of people. I want to go deep dive on and exploring their work, but yet I haven't had the chance of really touch on all the work. It's only been 3.5 years since my awakening, so I've got a bit of catching up to do, but not to worry because we've got you today to share with us, starting with Earth. I heard on Earth before it was being called Earth, it was Gaia, and before Gaia, it was another name prior to that as well.
Well, as far as the names, I don't know. I mean, yeah, Gaia, these are ancient names. I'm sure it's had two or three, but we're a species with amnesia. You know, Gary, imagine tomorrow if you just woke up, couldn't remember a thing, nothing in your past. You forgot everything. How would you live? You would have somebody tell you who you are,
Mm.
what you like, what happened in your past, and everything that they want you to do to go forward. They would tell you what you are and what you do. That is where the human race is. We have forgotten our past. And unless we remember the past, I don't think we can go forward. I really
Mm.
don't. Or somebody will tell us what we need to do to go forward.
Yeah. And it's kind of like the Truman Show right now that we kind of see there's certain
Yes.
glitches. It doesn't make sense. Like, and we're starting to go on the edge of civilization and see where we
Right.
reach.
Right. And the thing with the history of the Earth, I mean, the history of the Earth is connected in our whole solar system. I mean, they can say Ice Age all they want, and they can say that Pangea, the continents were connected, but that doesn't explain what happened in the solar system. The solar system, there something happened that caused the asteroid belt, caused Neptune to spin on its side, Venus to spin the opposite direction. Saturn has rings. Some planets have no atmosphere. Some planets have a bunch of moons. What's going on? You know, and as they're getting out further and further, NASA's discovering that, yeah, we're a little different than all these other solar systems.
So I guess like bring it back to the topic of Earth, because we could continue to expand to other planets. And you're right, like quite a few of the channeling sessions, stuff that I research, it talks a lot about all the stuff you just mentioned. It is fascinating, but it's a never ending topic as well. So tell me, how do you go about informing this ancient timeline of what actually came about in Earth's history?
Well, a lot of people, like, you know, Atlantis and you know Lemuria by doing your research. When you talk to most people, they know, they've heard of Atlantis, never heard of Lemuria in the Western world. Now you go to Mexico or Samoa, Hawaii, yeah, like, oh yeah, we know Lemuria. And so I try to start, why do people know about Atlantis but not know about Lemuria? And the answer to that is that Atlantis was a patriarch, and Lemuria was a matriarch. And we are, let's face it, we're a patriarch world, and we're changing, we're getting better.
James, so the people that haven't heard of like patriarch and matriarch, can you explain that as well?
Okay. A patriarch is what you see today. It is where the men are considered stronger, smarter, or in charge. And that something happened in our past. It's one of the things I want to know, why this hatred toward the females. You know, and it's not really a hatred. It's I want to control them. They're a piece of property. And a matriarch is not necessarily, everybody thinks when I ask them what a matriarch is, they say, oh yeah, women are in charge. No, it's not. If you want to know what a matriarch is, it's basically where the male and female are held even. The sacred feminine, the sacred masculine. If you want to know what a matriarch is, look at nature. Nature always has the answer. What do you see in nature? And one of the big things that stuck out to me is, in nature, the male always has to attract the female. He's got the bright colors. He's got the big mane of hair. He has to attract her. It's her that makes a decision on whether she wants to mate with him or not. Humans, they're exact opposite. Females put the makeup on. They do their hair. They try to attract the males. So I wanted to know what's going on there too. And you go back into the ancient times, ancient Egypt, even the men wore makeup because they were a lot of people don't know there's an upper and lower Egypt. Upper Egypt was a matriarch, lower Egypt was a patriarch. And it's a long story in itself there too.
Yeah, I remember hearing something or reading something about that as well. Yeah. So you were saying that about not many people have heard of Lemurians except for people, I guess, the Pacific Islander people and people in Mexico. So, and I guess the one of the reason was because it was more matriarch
Yeah.
from
They
the
actually came from
Lemurian.
they actually came from Lemuria, and Australia was part of Lemuria. The Aborigine, they're original. I don't like to call them Aboriginal because ab in front of original means not original. And
Ah,
so, but I call them the original people of Australia. They were Lemuria. New Zealand was Lemuria. India was part of Lemuria. All of Asia, part of Lemuria, and Atlantis was near what we call Ireland today. And there was another continent called Appalachia, and that's where we get the name Appalachian Mountains here in America. America, actually, the name America means land of serpents. It's very ancient. The Aztec people, that's where they got their name. They said they came from Aslan. Aslan was Atlantis.
Ah.
So we had this two civilizations going on in prehistory, and I wanted to know what's going on, where'd it come from, what's all this about.
Ah, that makes sense. Okay, so what do you find? I think like from reading your site, you started dating back to 700,000 BC.
Yeah, well, yeah, that is when there's all hominids were walking the earth. I mean, even Lucy, the famous Lucy of Dr. Leakey, his skeletons, he calls Lucy, she was a hominid. There was hominids all over the planet then. And something happened somewhere. It happened twice, and a lot of people don't know that. We're the Homo sapien race, but there was a Homo sapien race before us. Something happened about 300,000, and I don't know the exact dates. I'm just guessing here. But about 300,000, our brains exploded in size 50%, just overnight. Nature doesn't work that way. And I wanted to know, and when I got in and dug into the ancient texts about Atlantis, aliens came up.
Yeah.
And Michael Tellinger's book, Slave Species of the Gods, his book goes into this about the creation of man, humans, and what happened. Why was it? And if you get into the Sumerian text, well, all texts worldwide, it doesn't matter if they're Chinese, doesn't matter if they're Egyptian, Gaelic, Native American, there's one common thing with the myths. The gods always fight. There's nonstop conflict between the gods. They have a creation myth, the gods fight, and what's going on here? So I found that if you look into the Sumerian text and even the Irish Gaelic text, they talk about aliens coming here looking for gold.
Yeah.
And we as a human race, what do we love? We love gold. Well, now the younger generations love Bitcoin, but gold has been there ever since man, the history of man, from the beginning. And these texts explain why they were here, and it said something about their atmosphere. They needed it for their atmosphere. And studying NASA and all this stuff, they use gold in their glass for the rockets. They use it for oil, as oil, because oil will just freeze in outer space. So you have to have something that's not going to freeze. So they use liquid gold. And so then come to find out, a lot of the skyscrapers put gold in the glass too. So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, is this what the ancient texts are trying to say, that they needed it for their atmosphere? Did they have a dome, some sort, that they needed to have this gold to keep? Because what this glass does in like skyscrapers and stuff is keeps the heat out, keeps the cool in during the summer, and then keeps the warm in and the cold out during the winter. And I was, well, okay, is this what the ancient texts are trying to tell us? They needed this for their atmosphere. And when I found out that there was the asteroid belt was actually a planet called Tiamat at one time, and it was a watery planet. The ancient text knew it as the second sun. It was at least 4 or 5 times the size of Jupiter. So it looked like 2 suns in the sky at times. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Star Wars or Luke Skywalker's looking at the 2 suns setting. And I'm like, okay, yeah. They knew, they looked at these ancient texts. They saw what's going on.
Yeah.
So a lot of researchers like Michael Tessarian, he has a book called Atlantis, Alien Genetic Intervention. That book is, well, you'll be like, wow, okay, what's going on? Genetic manipulation and alien intervention. That's his book. And he thinks that they were doing something on Tiamat, but I think that was their home. I think that they lived in this solar system, these aliens, and that was their home. And they needed to mine the other planets in the solar system to get gold if they had like a glass city underwater. That's all my speculation. I have not seen anything in the text, but that's my theory. So they came here and they started digging. And if you look all over the world, there's mines everywhere, ancient mines that they're like, okay, how did this happen? And I went to Mammoth Cave here in America. And the story there is that water did this over millions and millions of years. And you can see in parts of these caves that, yeah, water probably did it because they're smooth. But when I'm walking through these caves, I'm looking going, something removed the earth. This was not done by water. These sides are not smooth. The Native American or legends will tell you, yeah, these were here. We just used them as walkways and everything to get from one place to another a lot of times. This was their a lot of transportation method. They used it for shelter too. So they'll tell you these were here, and they'll also tell you things like Grand Canyon was made in one night. Our scientists will tell us that that was done over millions and millions of years. And so then we'll get to that, how the Native Americans say that that was made in one night. But so the gods were here. That's what I call them the gods, these aliens. They were here mining for gold and other precious metals. And they got tired. It was hard work. It was a lot of hard work. And so they decided they were going to create a race to do the work for them.
And this, from your research or your understanding, like these aliens, were they at a higher dimension? They can just move stuff to mine stuff? Because I've heard that they needed people to work as slaves to help with the gold, but mine the gold. But if they were at a higher level of consciousness or dimension, then I would imagine they could use their thoughts to just move the earth and get the gold out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't say no to anything because I have an open mind, but I think they actually used high technology, advanced technology to do this. And one of the things is that for them to lift these blocks and everything that they did is that the earth had less gravity at one time. And we will get to that too. They were able to lift so much more than we are today. But why does earth have more gravity today than it did back then? And so I think they were able to move things a lot easier back then, but they still were very advanced in being able to move things with technology, because we can't build the Egyptian pyramids today. We can't move that stuff. I mean, my mainstream science will tell you that they did it with just slave labor and sticks and stones and chicken bones,
Yeah.
So they created this race, and they made them just as big and just as smart as they were, but they outnumbered their creation. And so this creation, they were their slaves. They had to do it. And they created every race known to man. This is where I go off the path of a lot of other researchers, in that our skin color was done to protect us from the sun or to protect us from lack of sun. So if you were underground, you had very light skin, or if you were in the northern areas where the sun wasn't out a lot, you had very light skin. If you were out in the sun all day at the equator, they gave them very dark skin. It was all about protection from the sun or lack of sun. And so our skin color here on Earth goes from really light to really dark and all shades in between. And so it all depended on where they needed this first race to do their jobs for them. It was all about protecting them.
And was the human race at the time, was it made from scratch, or was it modified from an existing humanoid or animal?
Yeah, there was hominids all over the planet. And science can't tell us how the Cro-Magnon disappeared, how Neanderthal disappeared, how Homo erectus disappeared. They just up and disappeared. And in the text, it gets pretty graphic. They talk about how they came down and tried to mate with the hominids. And in the Cabra Nagast, it talks about how the women's bellies exploded because they couldn't carry them full term. So they went back to the drawing board and they created them in lab, motherless and fatherless. And from what I can tell, they took the ovum of the alien females and the sperm of the male hominids to create the first race. And they made them just as big and just as smart. This alien race, I think they were, all the texts show them as huge, and there's ancient skeletons, and I think they're the first race of 10, 12 foot, all over the world, everywhere, 10, 12 foot skeletons all over the world. And the aliens themselves, I think, most of them think the gray is what our modern day gray is what, but I think we looked a lot like them. I think they were just this side of death gray color, and they looked a lot like us. But if you look at the text, there's alien races, like billions of them, that are all different colors, all different shapes, all different sizes. It's, truth is more interesting than fiction. When you get into these ancient texts, the Mahabharata is so fun to read if you know what you're looking at. So they created this first race and put them to work. And some of the texts say that went on for 1,200 years before they rebelled. And I was like, okay, why did it go on for so long? The answer was that they were outnumbered. They knew they were. And if you look in the Mahabharata, there's a race called it's either Devas or Devas. And forgive my pronunciations on some of this, because it's just me looking in these books and trying to.
Where is this book Mahabharata from?
It's India. It's from India. It's their ancient text.
Is it a Vedic or a particular sect that created it?
No, it is like our ancient text, the Bible here in America. It's their historical text. The Hindu have the blue gods.
Yes.
That's what these stories are all about.
Yes.
All the gods from Hinduism.
Yeah.
And so Vishnu and off the top of my head, I'm trying to think who they were, but this is stories of what happened in India. And if you go back far enough, it has to do with Lemuria and the whole planet.
Mm.
So they talk about an alien race coming here. And from what I can tell, the number one law in the universe is to not mess with another life form. They need to evolve on their own. Mm. And this alien race decided they were going to create another one. And so from what I can tell, the Devas or Devas were like an alien race of galactic police. So they came here to find out what was going on, and a battle ensued. And this is why I think that this race that came to Earth was from Tiamat, because they destroyed the planet Tiamat. Again, Star Wars, they have a planet that's destroyed, and it's Princess Leia's planet. Have you ever seen the first Star Wars where they destroy her planet? And in the new ones, there's even the Republic the planet is destroyed. So this is what caused the solar system to go into chaos. Now, if you look at our word devastation, it's got the word diva at the beginning of it, deva, and it's there because they caused it. When something has, it's called devastation.
Wow.
Now, we also use the word catastrophe and disaster. Both those words mean without a star. Wow. So our words are telling us that we need to look at our history. So they destroyed this planet Tiamat, and when it happened, it wasn't this. There was 3 different times that the water from Tiamat came into Earth, and the first one wasn't the worst. It'll be the second one that'll be the worst, and we'll get to it. But this first one, it caused like Immanuel Velikovsky's work. He talks about writings that said Venus was like a comet in the sky, and all the planets, this caused the planets to get out of their circular motion around the sun. It was chaotic. And so the Earth didn't start doing anything in this time, but this is what happened. And according to the text, there was also mining going on Mars. And this caused the catastrophe of Tiamat, caused the atmosphere of Mars to go away, to disappear. And the texts say that Tiamat hit the Earth so hard that it became part of its core.
Okay.
And science is finding that the deeper they go down into the Earth, they're finding crystallized water. They thought they were going to find lava, but they're finding crystallized water, and they're thinking, okay, maybe our oceans come from deep down in the Earth instead of coming from somewhere out there. But if they would just read the text, they'd see that the oceans came in from Tiamat. But we didn't have a lot of oceans before Tiamat was destroyed. The land, there was a huge landmass. There was lakes. There were some oceans. But they're nothing like what they are today. I'd say that we only had maybe 25% of the water on this planet that we have back then than what we have today.
Mm.
So this caused so much disaster and catastrophe here on the earth that it killed a bunch of the aliens that were on, that it killed their home planet Tiamat. They were on Mars. It killed them there. And there were very few left here on Earth. And so this was the uprising of the first race, the Homo sapiens. And they rebelled and left. The place that they were at was Atlantis. They left and made Lemuria. So this is how Lemuria was created, and it's another reason why we don't know a lot about Lemuria. And so you have them going to Lemuria and the aliens staying in Atlantis. Now, they're either going to have to work together or they're just going to war the whole time.
Mm.
They go somewhere in between. They do work together, and there is an advanced civilization on this planet. So they went and started creating, as soon as the Lemurians left, I'll call them the Lemurians now, the first race. They left, they started creating pyramids. If you look at the Mayan pyramids and around even the Bosnian pyramid today, they're having to dig out. It's a mountain. Have you looked into the Bosnian pyramid at all? Okay, that's very interesting. He's digging it out right now. But he was part of Dr. Sam, is what I call him. He was part of the excavations in the Mayan temples and everything. And if you look at pyramids all over China, they're everywhere, but they're covered. They're covered. They look like mountains. And the ones here in America did the same thing. So these pyramids were built, let's say 100,000 years ago. And yes, I'm saying the Mayan pyramids are older than the Egyptian pyramid. How long would they have to been there to be covered by earth? So, and I don't blame China. Doesn't want people coming in and excavating those pyramids, because just look what they did in America. They came here and destroyed everything, and they said it didn't exist. But Dr. Sam is in Bosnia, and he is, they're telling him the same thing that they told him when he was doing the mine. That these are hills, these are mountains, they're not pyramids. And he's uncovering them, and he's like, yeah, no, they're pyramids. They did the same thing in the mine when they first started uncovering the mine. A lot of people didn't know they were covered in earth, and they had to be dug out. So how long had these pyramids had to be there to be covered by earth? Kukulkan in Mexico, oh my God, the pyramid of the sun, the pyramid of the moon, that is beautiful. It's so beautiful, but they had to dig it out. It looked nothing, 100 years ago, it looked nothing like it did today, but it looked exactly like that maybe 100,000 years ago. So they created their own civilization in Lemuria. In Atlantis, they had their pyramids there. And like I said, the area of Ireland and Appalachian continent, they had to work together. So they did trade. They did, you can tell, it shows that they traded with each other. They ran it. Now, I still think they had advanced technology at this point. I still think they had the advanced technology to where they were able to fly and all this stuff. But the Atlantis aliens decided they were going to make a second race. They still didn't want to do the toil, the work. They just did they're like, yeah, we got to get. Plus, their own home planet was destroyed, so they figured if they made another race, they could probably make ships to get out of here and go to another home planet somewhere else, which I'm guessing may be Sirius, because there's so much star alignment of these temples and pyramids that have to do with Orion's belt, which Sirius is in. So they created a second race. They weren't going to make the same mistake they made the first time. They made them too smart. This time they had to dumb them down. In the Mayan Popol Vuh, it says they went too far in dumbing the second race down. And they made what is called the people of wood. And it basically said they were too dumb to do the work. They couldn't do it. They weren't smart enough. They just wandered around aimlessly. This is your apes. They went too far, and the Native Americans will tell you, we did not come from apes. We have a common ancestor, but we did not come from apes. And this is what they're trying to tell. And Helena Blavatsky, a Russian researcher from about 100 years ago, she came out and said, yeah, we didn't come from apes, they came from us. And reading the Popol Vuh, it basically says they dumbed down the second race too far and they had to start over. So the third shot at it, and they created the Homo sapien sapien, which is us. So if you look at the text, okay, and I have to step back a second. The first race that they made was androgynous. Okay. Now, androgynous means that they had both male and female characteristics. Okay. And I always wondered where the hatred toward gay people comes from in our world. And them rebelling was very unforgivable to this alien race. But it gets worse. Okay. So after they made this second race, when you look at the Adams and the Eves, you have to look at it as a race of Adam and a race of Eve, a whole group. And what they did is they split the sexes. And Plato has in his writings about how Zeus talks about, I'm going to split the sexes, and he was proud of it. And that way, the second race would have to search for their missing half the rest of their lives. It would keep them from being smart. So they split the sexes, but the one thing they did with the Adams is that they took the female hominid ovum and the male alien sperm to make the Adams, and the females, they did what they did with the first race. They took the female alien ovum and the male hominid sperm to create the females. Now, a lot of people don't know this, and this women, you got to realize your power. Bloodline runs through the female. If you want to know your true ancestry, you need to follow your mom, grandmother, your great grandmother, because the bloodline runs through the female. In ancient Egypt, they knew this, and this is why the pharaohs had to have a woman of the bloodline in order to rule. He couldn't rule unless his wife was of the bloodline. And so they gave the name to the men, the bloodline to the female. But you're not taught that the ancestry bloodline runs through the female. So yeah, if you want to know your true ancestry, keep going through your mom's side and follow it.
Wow. Because I think like even they said the Sphinx it used to be a female's face on it.
Yes, it did. And yeah, we're going to get to that here in just a minute. Yeah, because the Sphinx was built in the time between Virgo and Leo, the zodiac, which was about 10, 11,000 BC. And it was, we'll get to when they built that, because it was to show the time that they started Egypt after the War of the Gods. And we're getting ready to come to the War of the Gods.
We're not going to skip ahead.
But so they created this second race, and this is going to be the Adam and Eve myth with the serpent in the garden. This is going to make a lot of sense. So the serpent in ancient writings has to do with wisdom. It has nothing to do with the devil, has nothing to do with evil. It all has to do with wise people. But when you get back into the ancient text even further, this in ancient Egypt, serpents were called brothers of rebellion. And this first race was brothers and sisters of rebellion, but you got to go with what they wrote. So they were considered serpents. They were just as smart as their alien creators. And the aliens were considered serpents because let's face it, they were very intelligent. And I actually think that this is just my theory that, the aliens wore clothes. So when they took their clothes off and redid, they were shedding skin. And that was the way the ancients would look and say, hey, they're just like a snake, just like a serpent. And so I think that's how they got the name serpent, as far as, and going out in the sun, they would peel if they sunburned, just like a lot of light-skinned people do here. You peel real bad if you stay out in the sun. But I think it had more to do with the clothes. And there's ancient caves in France where they're finding what looks like zoot suits on pictures of people in these caves, and they're just looking at it going, what? They got hats, they got boots, they got zoot suits. What's going on? So The second race was made, and it's us. And we were a good race. We were just smart enough to do what they told us to do, and just not smart enough to not rebel. And so the Lemurians knew that the Divas had blew up the Tiamat planet, which was the home planet of the aliens, because they created them, the first race, the Lemurians. So they're like, okay, they're going to do this here. Man, we don't want the Divas coming back. They're going to blow this planet up. This is the only home we know. We got to save our home. So they come into Atlantis and they start telling them the history that this is what happened. They created you. They created us. The second race was slaves, and the Lemurians came into Atlantis and said, look, you're slaves. They created us. They also created you as a slave race. Come with us to Lemuria. You'll be free. And the Adams were, no, they were the perfect little working bee for these aliens. They were like, yeah, I don't know about that. But the Eves, they took a look at them and they're like, yeah, you're kind of cute. You're smart. They were attracted to them. They had beards. They had full heads of hair, a lot of them. And so the Eves are like, come on, Adams, let's go. And this is where you're getting the apple. In the ancient text, it wasn't an apple, it was fruit, but it still symbolized knowledge. And this is where you get an apple, the serpent saying, eat from the tree of knowledge, And so, and the Eves are saying, come on, Adam, take a bite. And they're like, no, but there were some that left. They came with them. And so a lot of the Eves left with them. Some of the Eves were but a lot of them left with them. And they went to Lemuria. Now, Michael Tessarian in his book says that the aliens got mad because they didn't have anybody to bring them their newspaper and fix them their dinner and all this stuff. And I thought, well, he's probably right, but they could just create more. I mean, they've got labs here. They can create more. And so I'm going to Star Wars. I hate keeping talking about this, but they have that Jabba Fett where he's creating his race in a lab, or Boba Fett. Boba Fett. Yeah, Boba Fett. And if you look at what Boba Fett means hero, villain, good, bad. Okay. So whatever side of the conflict you're on, it's good to you or bad to you. One man's hero is another man's villain. Okay. But Boba Fett's creating an army is what he's doing. And the video game they have, you have to go in and try to destroy this lab. And so I think that there's a lot of truth, and it does say in these texts that they went in and destroyed these genetic places, and this is what caused the War of the Gods. They couldn't create any more. These labs were destroyed, and the War of the Gods was advanced weaponry, nuclear weapons. They're finding fused glass all over the world, radiation in areas that they're like, whoa, why is this radiation so high? In Mohenjo-Daro, they found families still holding hands as they, just there, like something instantly happened. So when you read both sides of the text or listen to the legends, they blame each other. It's this side started it, this side started it. So, but with the nuclear weapons going off on the planet, it caused the world to spin out of control. The Native Americans have legends that the sun came up on one side, went down quick, came up on the other side, went down quick. It was spinning. This was, it was bad if you look at the text. And Immanuel Velikovsky talks about mammoths were frozen with food, fresh food still in their belly. So what happened? It caused an instant freeze to these mammoths. So the world is spinning out of control. And the Zulu Indians have a legend that a dragon laid the moon. It was put into place. Native Americans talk about how the moon was put into place. And I think the moon was put there. Now, I still think I think it's natural, but I mean, if you listen to NASA, they said that it rung like a bell when they landed on the moon for the first time. And I still think it's natural. But with the Earth spinning out of control,
the Australian Aborigine and different places, they said it wasn't there before, but then one day it just appeared.
Right. Yes. It just appeared. Yes. And I think the moon was put there because the earth was spinning out of control. Now, if it was done by the divas, I can't find who put it there. But this is what caused the earth to finally stop, and it's rocking back and forth, what we know as today. Now, NASA says that the earth or the moon is moving away from the earth 3 or 4 centimeters a year. I ask, is this the timer that one day that it finally breaks off? Well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. That Caesarion says it was locked, that it was put here to not just stop the chaos going on, but it was put here to lock the alien race in so they couldn't get out. That they've had enough strikes. That was it. They're going to be in here. They can't get out. And that's why I'm watching the space programs and everything. See, because all we've ever sent past the moon is robots. And if Elon Musk can get people to Mars, I'm watching that just saying, okay, can we do this? Can we do this? So we'll see if Tessarion's right that it's a lock that we can't get out. We can go to it, but we can't get out. So, but is this this lock moving 3 or 4 centimeters away every year? Will it finally break and unlock to where we can get out and start exploring space and be what we were born to be, explorers? So if you can imagine, the Lemurian pyramids were built before with all this chaos going on. This explains how the earth is just, Grand Canyon made in one night. The Thunderbolts, there talks about how the Thunderbolts program, which is, you can get on YouTube and they talk about it a lot. They talk about electromagnetic energy is what the whole universe is made of. And as these planets were spinning out of control and getting close to each other, there was all sorts of electromagnetic storms that were happening. It caused mountains to raise and canyons to be dug, just instantly. And that's what the Native Americans here in America are trying to say. It was done in one night. It was fire and water coming out of the sky, because with the earth spinning out of control, more of that Tiamat water was coming in. It went into the asteroid belt, out of the asteroid belt, and it caused all that. And some of the texts say that people ran into water trying to get away from the fire and water coming out of the sky, only to be boiled alive. But you have all these underground mines and everything, and that's where they went to get away from the earth spinning and the fire and ice coming out of the sky. They went into these underground mines and underground cities just to get away. And all the myths talk about, they either talk about ancestors coming out of the earth or coming from the stars. And this explains that, because after everything quieted down, they started coming out of the earth. And after, you also had the memory of the aliens coming from the stars. So this is when I think Egypt was built. This is about the time. So we're talking about 10, 11,000 years ago. That's when I think Egypt was built. What they had left, they used to build the pyramids, because we still had one more round of water to come in. And that's the Noah's Ark myth. So our gravity's still not as heavy as it is today. So they're able to build these pyramids with some of the technology that hasn't been destroyed yet. So they build the Egyptian pyramids, and it was one of the few places that you could actually build a civilization. It was a Mesopotamian area. So I think that's why science always says that life started in this area, because this is where they restarted. We'll just call it the Western world. And they built the pyramids, and they built the Sphinx to honor the time that they built the pyramids, which they gave it the head of a woman and the body of a lion, because it was built in between the time of Virgo and Leo. It was Pharaoh Khafre that changed it from a woman's head to a man's head, because he was a patriarch pharaoh. He was from Lower Egypt. So at this time, you have over in Lemuria, they just regathered in areas that they could and created civilizations. And the areas where the pyramids were still, that they could still be used, they used them. They still made cities and everything. But this is also why they think that they're hunter-gatherers. They were hunter-gatherers, because they basically lived off the land from there on out. I think that a lot of what they called their gods from the first race actually got hurt and killed in this. And so if you have a sacred place that the God once was and he's gone, you're going to leave it alone. It's sacred to you. You're going to go out and live your life. I mean, they did. They were hunter gatherers from that point on. So the next round happened about 4,000 to 6,000 years, and it's the Noah's Ark myth. When they talk about putting animals on a ship 2 by 2, that's Gemini. Gemini is the twins. Okay. It is all symbolically said. It wasn't a real ship. It wasn't, I think my own theory is when the bloodline of Noah came into Egypt from Sumeria. And this was because I think Sumeria was destroyed in the third round of water. And Plato even talks about, he tells the people of Greece, it's actually Solon, he wrote it down, it was Solon telling people of Greece, you're young, you don't know, you think there was one cataclysm, you think there was just one disaster. There were several. And this is what he's talking about. And I think that this third round with water coming in, it was the final round. And the 40 days and 40 nights they're saying that there was a lot of rain that came in, a lot of water, but it also, 40 is a code. And you have to read Ralph Ellis's work. The pyramid, the Great Pyramid is 40 times pi. And anytime in the Bible, they talk about 40 days, 40 nights, 40 days in the desert, and that number 40 just comes up over and over and over. It just means that they were in on the secrets of Egypt. So that's what 40 is. I tell a lot of my readers, you need to get symbol literate. So much is in the symbology for people with eyes to see and ears to hear. And so once you start getting symbol literate, and I have it on my website, I tell people, I show people this is what this symbol means. And when you come across it, this is what you should think. So the story of Noah putting 2 by 2 is all about this third round came in 4,000 to 6,000 years ago in the time of Gemini. And I think that it was the destroyed Lemuria and the bloodline of Noah, which goes all the way back to Adam, came into Egypt. And that's when, about that, I don't want to get too far into Egypt because we could do 2 or 3 episodes on Egypt. But that's when the patriarch in the Western world pretty much started. It started with Abraham. And if people get on my website, they'll see that Abraham was actually a pharaoh called Mam-Abre. They just switched the name around for the Bible. And that's when patriarch world started on this planet.
Interesting.
I know it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to take in.
So I want to, I guess, go back to just for my own purpose, but also for the listeners. What were some of the text that you were referencing? Because I didn't want to interrupt the flow, but because you just dropped one here and dropped one there, but I'm sure that you spent a lot of hours and days and months studying a lot of these ancient texts.
The Sumerian text, let me read a couple things out of the Sumerian text here. This one, you have slaughtered a god together with his personality. I have removed your heavy work. I have imposed your toil on man. In the clay, God and man shall be bound to a unity brought together, so that to the end of days, the flesh and soul, which in a God have ripened, that soul and a blood kinship be bound. With picks and spades, they being humans, built shrines, they built big canal banks for food for the people and sustenance for the gods. That's just talking about some of the creations. And a lot of people, they think that, especially the New Age, when they talk about Atlantis, they think that it was a very spiritual, great things going on. When I dug into this, it's different. It's in the Assyrian tablets, they commanded there to be plagues. Let Natmar diminish their noise. Let disease, sickness, plagues, and pestilence blow upon them like a tornado. They commanded, and there was a plague. Natmar diminished their noise. Disease, sickness, and plague, pestilence blew upon them like a tornado. They controlled them because they were slaves, and that's how they did it. Let me get down here to other creation myths out of the Popol Vuh. Okay, here's the Popol Vuh. It says, let us make him who shall nourish and sustain us. What shall we do to be invoked, to be remembered? In earth, we have tried with our first creatures, but we have not make them venerate us. So then let us try to make obedient, respectful beings who shall nourish and sustain us. That's talking about making the second race because the first race revolted.
And the Popol Vuh, where is the origin of that from?
Okay, that is the Mayan text. But if you go into Mexico, they're calling it the Mayan Bible. And it was the Spaniards, Francisco Jimenez, Father Francisco Jimenez. Because when the Spaniards went into the Mayans, they destroyed everything. They took all the books, they just destroyed their lands, their temples, and destroyed their hieroglyphs. And he took and wrote what was left. Now, you can tell there's all sorts of Christian stuff going on in this book because they're trying to convert the Mayans to Christianity. So again, you need to be symbol literate because I think a lot of the stuff he wrote down, he didn't understand. They were like, you got to do this. And so he was just writing what was left over, but he was putting Christian influences on it because, the church was on his back. He was a priest. He was a father. And
I remember reading about that. And also to your point of Atlantis, like I had the original impression that they were spiritual or not, but they had like telepathic power. They're very advanced. And you just assume that advanced also equals to higher consciousness, which is mean that they're more loving. But I forgot whose work it is, but they talk about just because someone is of a higher consciousness or have like telepathic power, doesn't mean that at the time that based on the group consciousness, they are more mature. It's almost like, at the end of the day, we're all humans. So back then, like whether it's Christians or Muslim or Buddhism, they all had slaves of some sort. And so we weren't that advanced in our group consciousness.
Right. Yeah. And I thought the exact same thing. I mean, until I got into here and started reading these texts, I was like, wait a minute, this is totally different from what I believed. And I mean, they were very advanced. They probably had consciousness, a lot better consciousness than we did. But it answers the questions of why there's so much conflict in our world, why we love money, why we're greedy, why we fight so much. It all comes out of Atlantis. I thought that if we ever met an alien race, they would have no use for money. Now, after reading all these texts, I'm thinking that money is what aliens use. If it's not in nature, which you don't see any birds or other animals exchanging money for anything. If it's not in nature, I'd call it alien. But they gave us their mind, but we had the hominid mind, and the trick is to balance both. And when we balance both, we can do great things. When you think that you came from apes, you're like, okay, we're the epitome of creation. We're the greatest thing there ever was. But when you realize that we have so much more potential from what was in our history, you're like, wow, we can unlock so much more within our DNA. And they call it junk DNA. It's just locked DNA. We can unlock it. They just don't understand why there's so much of our DNA we don't use.
So many different places I've learned from reference that it just needs to be unlocked. And once you unlock this, that's where a lot of the abilities that we've lost, you start to gain it back as well.
Yeah, we'll remember it. I always say that we're not learning, we're remembering.
So with all the stuff that you've learned from the history, how has it changed your view of looking at today's world and how you approach life? What do you think are some of the lessons that we can learn as a species from the past and use it for the present?
Because of this, I see so much potential in the human race, but I also have empathy. I say in a lot of my writings, and my heart bleeds for the human race, because if they just knew, that what's going on, we have this fear that is in us, and it comes from this history, this cataclysm, this disaster that, even everybody, or first thing when something happens, like your head, something negative pops in. It's like, oh God, don't do that. It's bad. Don't do it. You have this negative voice in your head. And I think that that's where this is coming from. It helps me understand the human race so much better with knowing that this happened in our past. I'm more empathetic toward them, and
it's like deep trauma, like from ancestors and lineage that hasn't been healed.
Right, exactly. And all of us have it in our childhoods and everything, just getting lost as a kid.
Mm.
If you're a little kid and you're lost, that is so traumatic. Subconsciously, you think, oh no, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Okay. So as you get older, you may not remember that as a kid or as an adult. You may not remember that happened to you as a kid because you lock it away. But if you brought it to the surface and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that happening. Or if you got yelled at by a teacher because you were too loud, so you became shy as an adult. But if you brought that to the surface because you forgot about it, and oh yeah, I remember that happening, it kind of unlocks, gets you out of the shyness. So bringing up our past and dealing with it and seeing, oh wow, this actually happened. It will advance leaps and bounds as a human race, just knowing and dealing with what has happened. You know, a lot of people are claustrophobic. Where does that come from? You know, they've never been locked in anything before. Your ancestors may have been locked in a cave for this whole duration. You know, people are afraid of spiders. They're spiders probably all over caves or whatever, you know? And so if we deal with that, just bring it up and say, well, where do these fears come from? Where does this hate come from? Where does this conflict? A lot of people have a fear of swimming. They've never been anywhere near water before in their life. If somewhere in our subconscious, our subconscious as far as the human race, a lot of people drowning in this cataclysm. This you bring it up, you unlock it. Hey, who knows? You might become a great swimmer. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So I guess it explains a lot of the fear that where it comes from. You also mentioned about the conflict. Why do you think we are mean and hurting each other?
I think that it comes from they gave us their DNA. Again, I looked at nature, you know, other than survival and carrying on the species, there's not much fighting going on. I mean, they fight for a mate, they fight for food, but it's not all out war. But they gave us their mind, they gave us their genes, but they didn't give us a book on how to operate it, you know?
Mhm.
They couldn't. Well, even if they did, we wouldn't remember it because uh, when all this happened, they couldn't write it down. There was nothing to write stuff down with. That's why we have so many oral legends, so many oral myths. And then after years and years and years of it being passed verbally, somebody finally wrote it down once we got this. So I think there's just a lot of conflict. Other the myths I mean, there's so much truth, and they talk about astronomy, they talk about psychology, but the truth is just it's all over the mess. You just have to be open to see it and be open to understand what they're saying.
Mm, great. Well, thank you so much. So for people that wants to go deeper dive, I'm gonna make reference to your website for them to visit and to read all about, especially the post that you wrote about the ancient timeline. It just breaks it down in so clear and concise manner. Especially if you're more visual, you're gonna be able to read like the exact BC these things happen or the rough estimate of when the timeline and how it happened. But it definitely like it clears it up so much for me in terms of understanding what has happened in the past. And for me, I guess one of the bigger lessons I've learned from the past is when I was understanding about the history of Atlantis, like kind of what you touched on, and it talks about this more from Dolores Cannon's work that they were starting to mix animal and the human species and to make the mermaids, the half man, half horse, and et cetera, et cetera. And then you were talking about they weren't allowed to mix with the species. And then to know that, and I only knew part of this at the time, but I didn't know that we've already cloning the sheeps, we cloning different animals. And like I knew that we were growing human organs in animals, in pigs, and
Yes.
different things. And we started to mix different things up. And I think they talk about a plague or a disease that happened in Atlantean times that killed off, started to spread and stuff. And you look at what's happening around our world with COVID these days,
Mhm.
imagine that there's certain human organs that's working well in pigs. But there's certain, I don't know, certain genes or certain like bacteria that may be okay in the pig environment, but once you put in the human environment, it may behave completely different. And suddenly we have something that's spread that we cannot contain, we cannot control.
Right.
So if we don't learn from the past, like we try to mess with things that we think that we have an understanding on, but
Right.
potentially one wrong move, you can wipe out a whole like species.
Exactly. Yes, you can. Yes. And Yeah, and I think that the text talking about mixing with animals is, I think that all went with that second area that they were like, well, okay, we got to do this, we got to do this, and I even say in my writing that if there is a Bigfoot, it was probably created at this time, and I'm kind of, Native Americans said they traded with this Bigfoot or whatever. So who knows? Who knows? They did a lot of tinkering at that time.
Man, James, you continue to impress me with the vast knowledge that you have and from all the research you've done. And I'm so grateful that you came on to the show today in our podcast to share or just to sprinkle some of your wisdoms to help us remember what's really happened in the past. And I look forward to opportunity to perhaps explore other topics of interest to our audience. So any last word on this topic that you want to share with our audience?
I'm just hoping that I've got the curiosity stirred up in people that, oh man, this is great stuff, and go look at it. It's truth is greater than fiction when it comes to these ancient texts. I would love to see people get interested in them. And if they would just actually go and read them, they'd probably get hooked. It hooked me, it hooked several other people I know. And that's the main thing, is that I want to light the flame of curiosity in people to know what their history is so that we don't have amnesia anymore.
Fantastic. And I'll quote your earlier line that coincidence is the if you're listening to this or you're watching this is not by luck, it's not by chance. There's two incidents that's seemingly random coming together in this video or just podcast just popped up. It's just one big event that's leading you to this remembrance. So subscribe to James' newsletter, subscribe to our channels, and to stay tuned. We're going to talk more about these awakening topics. So any comments, any questions you have, feel free to shoot it to us. So God bless to all, and let's chat soon.
Thank you for having me, Gary.
Thank you, brother.